What actually did Christ do as a model of godly leadership? Well, he took responsibility. He actually led. He actually said, I know what I'm doing. Some guys do need kind of a poke, right? They need to be prodded. They need to be rebuked or corrected. Other guys actually need some encouragement. And usually it's a mix of both. It's like, hey, God's for you. God's with you. God wants this more than you do. And he's with you to do it. I'm in your corner. I'm backing you up, but you need to not sulk and whine and moan in resentment and be passive. Instead, you need to get up and take responsibility.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Iron Deep podcast. My name is Mike Stansberry. Today we have Joe Rigney, special guest, all the way from Moscow, Idaho. Looks like he's in his office there. A little bit of books over there in the bookshelf. Joe, you've written a book called Leadership and Emotional Sabotage. Tell us a little bit about our audience, about, what do you do for a living? What's life look like for you? And then why did you write this book?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a professor at New St. Andrews College here in Moscow. I'm also, I will be soon a pastor at minister at Christ Church, and husband, father, high school football coach, all kinds of different hats there. And this book kind of emerged out of my own teaching experience as a pastor and a professor. And kind of observing the cultural movements over the last, 10, 15 years, and seeing a real need for seeing the way that leaders were sabotaged, hijacked, steered, institutions, organizations were steered. And so I'd been helped by a certain number of resources, but those resources weren't explicitly Christian and didn't ground things sort of in the scriptures. And so I wanted to kind of translate some of those best insights, but really also root it in more biblical soil.
Okay. The book, I've read it once. I did what you actually asked us to do is I read the book and then I gave it to my pastor, and I've listened to an audio a couple times. And the chapter that I really think that would be something that would help our audience is mostly men, Christian business owners. Specifically, a lot of us are in the real estate industry, and a lot of us are, have kids and teenagers and households. And chapter 4 is your chapter 4 on courage in the home. Just I read it today. It was interesting. God does there's no such thing as coincidence. I tell my kids all the time is in the Bible reading that I'm reading today. It was Ephesians 5 and 6, and then I reread your chapter today, and it was all about that chapter as well. So let's dive in there. Courage in the home. What's required? What should men specifically look at in that scripture? And then tell me about the chapter in the book, how you kind of explain things, and how should that operate?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is getting clear on what it means to be the head of anything, of a home, of a church, of a business, how headship works. And headship always implies bodyship. If you don't have a body, you don't have a head. So headship implies bodyship. And it's a symbiotic relationship. God designed social organisms to work the same way he designed our bodies. They're supposed to work in harmony with one another. And for the head, maybe start with this. The Bible teaches that it's just a basic fact that husbands are the head of their home. It's not a job. You don't apply for that job. You just have it by nature of the case. It's sort of baked into the cake. The question is not whether you'll be the head. It's what kind. Will you be a faithful one or an unfaithful one? Will you lead like Christ, or will you lead like Adam? Will you abdicate, or will you step up to the plate? So the issue is never whether, it's what kind. And so if you're going to be a faithful head, I think the first thing is you need to know what that body is for. Like, what's God's purpose? So the function of a head in a body is to order and structure the body for its purpose. That means you have to know what the purpose is. You have to be aware of what has God designed, in this case, the household for. And I think if we look in the book of Genesis, we get a pretty good indication that the household is designed for fruitfulness and for dominion. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. That's a command given to the human race, but the sort of baseline institution that God establishes in order to accomplish that is the household. And so So once you know that, so fruitfulness and dominion is what your household is for. Then it's how do you order and structure it. Um, and in the book, I argue that one of the more fundamental principles, at least as fundamental leadership principles here, is this notion of presence. That first and foremost, you lead your home by your own gravity. Not so it's your words matter, your actions matter, your deeds matter, but fundamentally, it's about if those don't emerge from a presence, a steady, uh, competent, confident, glad-hearted presence, then what you'll find you're doing is you're trying to use your words and sometimes your tone of voice to compensate for the absence of gravity. So when a dad feels like he's got to yell in order to get his way, it's because he's intuitively recognizing my gravity's insufficient right now. I can't just pull my family. I've got to push them by force with my words. So the head in a home order structures the body for its purpose through his presence and his words and his actions. And then the other thing he's doing is he's empowering the various members of his household to do what they're calling, to fulfill their calling. What do they need in order to get done what they need to get done? So he's not doing everything, but it is his responsibility to see to it that he's providing the resources necessary, the strength necessary, the time necessary for his wife and his kids to do what they need to do. So that's kind of a baseline. Now there's an external component. That's kind of the internal. This is how you're ordering it internally. There's an external component as well we could talk about, but that's a pretty good place to start for thinking through leadership in the home.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in a household where my dad necessarily had gravity. So I understand that, and now I see by reading through this the compensation, and then I see what I learned from that, and how I've lacked gravity and try to compensate with other things. And so it was really helpful there to kind of understand, like, hey, you just first and foremost be the nucleus and be responsible for everything. And so one of the things that we have a problem with in this culture is blame shifting, and I see it in every chapter of the book, but in here it hits home, and I want it to hit home for the guys that are listening. Is that and this is hard to, we're responsible for our marriage, we're responsible for our families, our businesses, our kids, and there's no skirting it. And I love how you I think you asked this question, is like, does the Bible teach that the man is the head of the household? And for so often, and I see it in our culture, is that there's ambiguity there, but there's no ambiguity according to Scripture. So how does someone begin? Let's say they're in a position where, like, they see themselves and they go, okay, I'm not doing that. How do they course correct? What do they, what do they do next? Tell me about that. Tell me about how you counseled somebody maybe in this position before.
Yeah, so I think if you realize, okay, I don't have the gravity, I'm not leading with presence, I'm not guarding, protecting, I'm not doing it. I think the first thing is you have to start with yourself, because you can't export to your family what you yourself lack. So this is why the sort of fundamental virtue I commend in the book is sober-mindedness, which I define as sort of a clarity of mind, a stability of soul, and a readiness to act. And that clarity of mind is so sober-mindedness means you're not overwhelmed, led astray, guided by your passions. Your passions are not driving the ship; they're not steering the ship, but instead your mind and your heart, your mind and your will are there. Your passions are being shepherded and stewarded. They're important. You need them. It's not that passions are necessarily bad, but they are dangerous, and they frequently can lead us astray because they are more instinctive, impulsive. They don't consider the long view. They don't consider the big picture. And so God designed us so that He would be supreme over us. So God over our minds, and our minds over our passions. That's how it ought to work. Frequently, we're upside down. God's out of the picture, and our passions are leading, and our minds are rationalizing, making excuses, blaming others, things like that. So the first thing that a leader who's not doing it needs to do is get a grip on himself by cultivating that clarity of mind. And part of the most actionable kind of piece of advice in the book, I think, just kind of immediately, is one of the things a leader has to has to cultivate is a sensitivity to his own passions, paying attention to his own hesitations, his reluctances. When does he self-censor? When does he kind of steer away from conflict? When is he kind of getting his dander up? When is he, he can feel frustration rising? When is he shutting down? When is he kind of retreating? Paying attention to that instinctive, impulsive, those reactions of various kinds. So whether it's anger, which we typically will euphemize as frustration or annoyance, fear, which we call anxiety, desire, pity, compassion, whatever the passion is in particular, there's a tendency to let it run the show. And so a man needs to sort of reflect on oh, yep, there it is. I'm paying attention to my hesitations, my reluctances, my passions. And then I need to interrogate them. I need to figure out, well, where's it coming from? Why? Why did I react that way? Why did I shut down? Why was I tempted to blow up? And sort of analyze what are my expectations in this situation that aren't being met or whatever. So he's got to be able to kind of step outside of the emotional system and get a grip on himself. And then now he can enter back in and he can offer the same to his family. He can bring that stability. So he gets clarity of mind, what's going on with me, what's going on in the situation, stability of soul. He's grounded in who God says he is. He knows the gospel. He's believing it down in his bones, and that confidence that comes from that stability that comes from knowing who God is and that what God has you for, then leads to a readiness to act. You're not passive, but you're ready to step in. You're ready. No one else is coming. No one else is going to do it. It's on you. And so a leader has to realize, a husband has to realize, okay, this is my responsibility. I need to now step in, but now I'm not stepping in reactively, anxiously, with anger. I'm stepping in with sober-mindedness and curiosity, and now I can afford to be compassionate and to live with my family in an understanding way. All of those things emerge, I think, out of this steady, stable, sober-minded presence.
So that's really good. I love the sober mindedness. One of the things that really hit me in the book is I would go back to when my wife would ask me some things and I was bothered by them because I thought they were a detriment to maybe a character flaw or anything. So I would react instead of being curious about where all this comes from. I would instantly go, okay, is she angry with me? Is she mad at me? Instead of really getting to the substance of what she's saying, I would react. And I know that's a behavior that I've seen and learned and internalized, and it's mine. But you talk about that in this chapter, and it really hit me. It's like, oh, okay. I sometimes I'm curious if I'm aware, but most of the time I'm just like, oh, what's going on here? So
that's right. Yeah. So that tendency to be reactive, it is often like a learned habit, something maybe you pick up from your own family of origin, things like that. And I think one of the key things is, I don't know if I say this in the book, but it's a principle I've used a lot. That sort of thing can help explain why you are the way you are. It can explain certain patterns of temptation or weakness, but it's never an excuse. And I think this is the big thing part of what I'm pushing in the book is taking responsibility first for yourself and then for what God has entrusted to you is fundamental. So I come back again and again to this, when that comes to the household. The book of Job, opens with Job, his kids get together for their weekly party or whatever. And it says that Job would offer sacrifices on their behalf, lest they had sinned and cursed God in their hearts. So what is Job doing? Well, he's taking responsibility for his family. He's like, I'm the patriarch. I'm the one who's, I'm over this. Even though his kids are grown, clearly, he still has this sense of responsibility for his family. And what did that responsibility manifest? Well, it wasn't first barking orders at them. It wasn't telling them, trying to run their lives or anything. The first thing he did was he brought it before God. He said, God, this is mine, right? And I know that as the head, I'm responsible for this. And so I'm coming before you and saying, Lord, I know that this is my issue, that if there's sin in their hearts, that's in some ways, I'm not to blame for it. Their sin is their sin. I'm not to blame, but I am responsible for it. And so I'm bringing you, in this case, a sacrifice, lest they'd sin and curse God in their heart. Now, obviously, we don't live in that old covenant kind of era where we offer blood sacrifices on behalf of our family, but the principle of who's responsible, who's the one who, and so that now I think that would take is, you see something in your house, there's an issue, there's sibling rivalries and quarrelsome or disrespect to mom or just, challenges in the marriage itself. And you have to go, okay, first thing I need to do is I need to go before God and say, this is mine. Lord, I just need you to know this is mine. I don't know what to do yet, but I want you to know that it's my problem. And I know that you're going to hold me responsible for it. Give me wisdom, give me strength, give me steadiness and sober-mindedness to be able to see what I need to see and to act with wisdom and prudence as I try to lean in and address it. So I think that's a place I come back to that a lot. And then it means actually taking some action. It means doing something and not just being a spectator in the situation. That's another form of that kind of abdication and passivity.
Yeah, so one of the things, and I'll plug this if you guys are listening and you haven't downloaded the Canon Plus app, it's got a lot of great resources. And one of the things I think about when you talk about that is the household. I'm new to covenant theology. I'm new to the household stuff. I've consumed a lot of C.R. Wiley's stuff. I've a lot of stuff on Canon. And when you articulate what Job was doing for his family, it kind of messed up our whole American. It messed me up in this. Hey, I'm raising these kids, and I want them to. What I was taught is in Proverbs, shoot an arrow so they go. So when my kid's 18, 19, they leave the household and they start their own. And one of the things I get here, and you feel free to play with this concept, is like, no, this is, I'm going to be the head of the household until I'm gone, or head of a household. And I get to, I've got two sons, 21 and 15. And it's kind of that scripture has colored the lines a little bit differently for how I'm looking at their adulthood and how we're going to be grandparents and how, we're going to help them in their life, not just like, hey, you're on your own after 18, 19, which is kind of how it was done for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is a challenge whenever you're kind of feel like a little bit behind the eight ball coming in late. And the key thing is, Pastor Doug always talks about God takes you from where you are, not from where you ought to be or ought to have been. So, you can always start now, so that you can always begin with that. All right, I'm taking responsibility for myself, and I'm taking responsibility for what's mine. And then from that, like this is where confidence in the promises of God. He's faithful even if you've not been. And so now, begin to believe the promises now. Begin to rely and trust in Him now for all of that. Is the way forward.
Yep. One of the other great stories you had in the chapter was you articulated about Nabal and his folly. And I'd love for you to just articulate what that looked like in the chapter and how we can be helped by that story.
Yeah. So part of in the modern day, I think feminism is a key threat kind of to the integrity of the home and the church and the world and everything, right? It's a major ideological danger. And so the book, though the book doesn't target feminism explicitly, it's sort of there's an implicit sort of patriarchal assumption all running throughout it. And what's more is I've written on this extensively, that this is a watershed issue. The danger, though, is that when somebody wakes up to that or sees that and begins to see not just the overt forms that we sort of associate with the world out there, but see the more subtle forms that can kind of work their way into the church, the assumptions and the catering, the accommodating, the being steered internally. Whether it's in your home, I mentioned in the book if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy school of husbanding, that sort of thing. When you see the subtle ways that it's worked its way in, then there can be, okay, I need to resist this. The danger then is if you've enrolled in a sort of war on feminism class, you're going to have war on feminism problems, which means it might not just be feminism, but you might actually become hostile to femininity, to womanhood itself. And part of the point, in the same way that the question is not whether a husband will be the head, he is. Is he going to be a faithful head like Jesus or an unfaithful one like Adam? There's a similar question. There's no question about whether the wife will be the body, and what does the body do? Well, the body influences. The body provides feedback, counsel, wisdom, and influence on the head, and then makes the heads, makes things fruitful. So women, the glory of women is their fruitfulness, both think about biologically in terms of bearing of children, but also just in their capacity to take good things and make them glorious and great. So this is a kind of a key part of the feminine glory. when you become so the question is not whether a woman will influence her husband, it's how. So will she be an unfaithful influence like Eve was, right? Handing her husband the fruit, or will she be a faithful influence like Abigail attempted to be, right? So her husband was a fool and a blockhead, and was going to wreck their whole household. It was about to get wiped out, and it was her wisdom first, in sort of attempting to do things in the home, but then failing that, her husband's not getting it done, and the household's in danger, and she steps in and she goes and she does so in a submissive way. She doesn't go to war against David. Instead, she goes and offers him gifts, and seeks to appease his wrath, remind him of what God has done for him, and so you see her wisdom and her prudence, her strength, and her influence. So in this situation, it's not that we want to actually get away from any notion of kind of the war between the sexes, but instead see that complementarity that's embedded in the marriage relationship and that spills out from there into society, or the church and society as a whole, where men are the head, men do lead, but women are vital in the fruitfulness, in the wisdom and providing feedback, and counsel, and making the head's efforts, making the body fruitful.
That's great. Well, let's go the opposite spectrum. Yeah, I've heard Doug Wilson say this before. A man who cannot stand up to his wife will never stand up for his wife. Also, on the other side of the spectrum, let's say you got a real passive guy. And again, one of the things I always, and this is, again, whenever I've talked to my wife about this, and it is something that I've worked on. If ever I'm around another couple and the man is just passive and the wife is overbearing, I just kind of walk out of the room, and it's not nice and it's not loving, it's not caring at all. Again, I may have the opposite problem, but the passivity or just a husband that's just not taking responsibility, or it's clear that he's not the head of the household. How have you counseled couples in the past about this part of leadership in the household?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm being I'm doing the best I can, but Mama's not happy, so I've got to make sure she's good.
Yeah. So the fact is that that sounds good, and it often sounds pious. I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to be a servant leader, but it's abdication under the banner of servant leadership. I'm not actually going to lead. I'm just going to acquiesce. And the fact is that most women, especially godly women, actually don't want a pushover, right? Some of the pushing is actually an attempt to see, do you have a backbone? And so if you're always acquiescing, and you're always giving in, it actually fuels the frustration, which it gets a vicious cycle of, the more and more frustrated that she gets, and then he seeks to harder and harder to accommodate, and both of them end up in this situation where they're bitter and resentful at each other. And nobody's honest about why. Actually, what would actually fix it? What would actually be a step in the right direction would be, for him to have some backbone, to take responsibility, and to be able to say, no, I think this is good and right, and I need you to help and assist me. I need you to come alongside, as we seek to do this thing. And for him to take that kind of initiative. And for a lot of guys, there is a learned passivity that's kind of they've had, and it's a weakness. But again, the weakness isn't an excuse. He's got to grow. He's got to come out of that passivity and to take responsibility. Otherwise, what will happen is he'll lead, his abdication will lead to greater and greater dysfunction, destruction, idolatry in his home. And then, this is the pattern we see in the scriptures. When the bill comes due, it's blame shift. Well, it was her idea. I was trying to love her by doing what she wanted. And it actually, it's just bad all the way down. So you have to be able to see it. And then you have to say, okay, what actually did Christ do as a model of godly leadership? Well, he took responsibility. He didn't just, do whatever the people of God said, whatever the church said, right? He sacrificed, and then he died, and whatever, but he actually led. He actually said, I know what I'm doing. And if he didn't know what he was doing, for a guy who doesn't know what he's doing, he needs to figure it out. That's part of it, is if you don't know, you need to go find those who do know and learn from them. Which is why, when you come across that, in the wild, it's trying to figure out which tool is necessary to be the proper inducement. Some guys do need kind of a poke, right? They need to be prodded, they need to be rebuked or corrected. Other guys actually need some encouragement, right? And usually it's a mix of both. It's like, hey, you stop making excuses, stop sulking, stop whining, and then couple that with, and hey, you can do this. God's for you, God's with you. God wants this more than you do, and He's with you to do it. I'm in your corner. I'm backing you up. I'm cheering you on. I want to encourage and exhort you to do it. So you need to know I believe that you can take some steps here, but you need to not sulk and whine and moan in resentment and be passive. Instead, you need to get up and take responsibility.
Well, that's a great exhortation, Joe, of just responsibility. I love that. I think we covered a lot of the different rainbows and flavors of how men are either too leading too much of an authoritarian or too passive, and what to do about each type, which is go back to God's word and become head of the household and find those things that are that you need to work on. And so finally, let's do this as we end our time here. What's an exhortation for this our audience here, mostly men? What is the common thread of the book? What is it that you're trying to communicate to men in this book specifically? And then where can everybody find Joe Rigney on the interwebs?
Yeah, so well, I'll answer the second one first. So Joe_Rigney on Twitter is about the only social media I have. I've written a lot in the past for Desiring God, got stuff on the Canon Plus app, American Reformer, World Opinions. Those are kind of my regular locations on the internet. In terms of kind of the exhortation, I think it would be kind of an image maybe that would help. I think this comes in that same fourth chapter. But in Psalm 19, David talks about heaven declares the glory of God, and then the image he gives is the image of the sun, right? Which which is like in the heavens, God has set a tabernacle, a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber and like a strong man running his course with joy. And so these sort of three images of the sun is kind of the base image. But when David sees the sun, he sees two other very masculine images. He sees the lover, right, the husband, the bridegroom, on his wedding night with the brightness and the joy. So David sees the sun and he's reminded of the brightness and glory of a groom on his wedding day. And then he also sees the warrior. He sees the man who says, I'm running into battle, I'm protecting my people, and I'm doing it for the joy. So the strong man there is not just like a runner. The strong man is the Gibborim, it's the warrior, it's the man of war. It's David's mighty men. That's that same word. And so David's reminded of these two kind of masculine images. And I think that's helpful. It's a good way to kind of approach every time you walk outside and you see the sun, big bright sun blazing across the sky, you should say, God wants me to see in that the bridegroom and the warrior, and ultimately to see Christ, right, who is the bridegroom and the warrior, the ultimate bridegroom and warrior, and then to say, that's what I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be that kind of brightness, that kind of glory in my own home, in my business, in the church. That's what I want to bring, is that gravity and that gladness that the Son has and that Christ has. That's my call. That'd be kind of an exhortation to your audience.
Well, I like it. Leadership and Emotional Sabotage. It's a book by Joe Rigney. You can pick it up on the Canon Plus. You can pick it up on Amazon and everywhere books are sold. Joe Rigney, thank you very much for doing the Iron Deep podcast, folks. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.